Excellent question.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to the inaugural First Amendment Day panel discussion hosted by the Martin Hall Agency. I would just like to announce that we have a box in the back of the room to my left to write on about what the First Amendment means to you and why you think it's important, as well as the extra credit signups if you're here for extra credit for one of your classes. And we have these long sleeve shirts for sale for $15, as well as coffee, pop, some water, and cookies for you to enjoy if you would like. So I'd just like to thank everyone for coming. And also, we have a trivia session at Terra Cafe right after this from 6 to 8 p.m. Definitely come and check that out. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Dr. Steve Urbanski, media law professor and director of graduate studies at the Reed College of Media. He'll be our moderator for the panel discussion today, and I hope everyone has a great time and learns a ton of stuff.
Thanks. I'm just going to real quickly introduce the members of the panel. First, at the very far end of the table is Shan Colley. She is a senior student at West Virginia University, majoring in English. Shan has advocated for victims of sexual assault through student involvement, online publications, and public engagement. She's received the NAACP's Rising Mountaineer Award, as well as the Undergraduate Award for Excellence in Community Engagement, and has been voted one of the most influential people at WVU by the Daily Athenaeum. She's published 2 poetry collections focusing on sexual assault and was chosen for the TEDx WVU's 2019 speaker lineup. Shan plans to attend grad school for a master's in higher education administration and will eventually work toward her PhD in the field. And afterwards, she hopes to conduct research to map rape culture on college campuses. And second is Katie Gusto. Katie graduated from the University of Virginia with a bachelor's degree and later received her Master of Education in Sports Administration. She came to WVU football after working in events at the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl in Atlanta. Katie is currently the on-campus recruiting coordinator for WVU football and plans all the visits for the various recruits when they come to campus. She also plans many of the events for the team as a whole. Next to her is Caitlin Samuelson. She's a third-year law student and president of the American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, of West Virginia University College of Law. In the summer of 2018, she worked in the election division of the West Virginia Secretary of State's office, where she performed critical legal research on engineering, political advertising, and the First Amendment. She is also currently president of the Labor Law Society, an organization dedicated to advancing the rights of workers to freely associate, speak out, and unionize. After graduation, Caitlin will serve full-time as a federal judicial law clerk here in West Virginia. And last, but certainly not least, is Dr. Joel Beeson. He's been a photojournalist, photo editor, and has covered the rise of hate groups and white supremacy in the past 4 years for the 100 Days Project in Appalachia through the College of Media. He's currently doing research on the role of social media and gaming platforms in driving extremism and polarization. He's a professor here at the College of Media at WVU, teaches media ethics and law. He earned his master's and bachelor's degrees from the University of Missouri, Columbia, and received his doctorate in American Studies at the Union Institute and University. He currently published a viral reality history endorsed by the U.S. World War I Centennial Commission, the Black Caucus Veterans Brain Trust, in partnership with Google Expeditions, entitled World War I Era Through the Eyes of the Chicago Defender. Each of the panelists will take about 10 minutes to go over their statements. And I think we have timekeepers out here who are going to signal them when they get near the end of their 10 minutes. We don't know what we'll do if they go over. So, Shan, we'll start with you.
Hi, okay. Howdy, everyone. Can I take this mic off by chance? Okay.
Sure.
Hi, my name is Shan Colley. I'm an English undergraduate student here at WVU, and I'm about to get my master's in the fall of 2020 in student affairs and higher education, so I'm super excited. I just got my first grad school acceptance email, which was a lot of stress taken off my shoulders. So today I kind of wanted to speak about sexual assault survivors online. So I want to say the fall semester of my freshman year, I came out with an article on the Odyssey. I was a content creator that was entitled, "I am a sexual assault survivor and I am okay." I was molested by my next door neighbor for about 7 years of my life, and I didn't tell anyone about it until my senior year of high school. So when I got on campus, I knew that I wanted to start doing a lot of like advocacy work for sexual assault victims, whether on campus or childhood. So I kind of released that article not only to advocate for sexual assault victims, but to kind of do something that was cathartic for me. Just because I had, held the secret so long, and I never thought that, I would tell a soul about this. So I released it, and it got pretty good reception. It was really great to have the support and everything from friends and family members online, but I was also vehemently harassed. So, like on Twitter, you guys know the WVU students account, right? They have students that take it over. So I did it for like a week or a few days, and someone in a Discord chat had somehow gotten my information, and they had called me. I was in the library my freshman year, and they were asking me really weird questions like, "Oh, what happened? What was your abuser's name? How long did it happen?" Just like really intimate questions about what had happened that I was incredibly uncomfortable with. And I found out that they were taking that information and telling their Discord friends, and it was going through like the dark parts of the internet. Yeah, it was really weird. So that was one thing that happened to me when I shared my story online. And then a few years later, I was lucky enough to speak in front of the Supreme Court steps for the Brett Kavanaugh trials. I was invited by Planned Parenthood to kind of share my story in order to kind of, just not have Brett Kavanaugh get the appointment. We all saw how that ended up going, but Planned Parenthood had released a photo of me doing this speech on their main Twitter account, and I was getting harassed so badly. People were saying, how big my forehead was, and I was there, speaking about something that I had held on to as a secret for years of my life. So yeah, sexual assault victims, especially after the Me Too movement, have been harassed online, myself included. I'm not the only one. I literally, like that one group of people on Discord said that I deserved to be raped again because I was a Hillary Clinton supporter. So there's a lot that kind of goes into sharing your story online. This is actually the first event since my TED Talk that I've done sharing my story, talking about it, because I kind of, feel this really weird guilt that if my face is put online or something, that I'm going to be made fun of for something that has absolutely nothing to do with my assault story. The reason why I've been so open about sexual assault in my own life is in order to help other people, in order to have, a conversation about it that we haven't really had before. So it's been rough, but discussions like these and panel discussions like this are good because it brings about a discourse that's healthy and in a really good environment. So that's kind of my experience. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Wow, thanks.
And Katie, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Gusto. I work at the football office in recruiting. So first I want to start off, raise your hand if you had a Twitter in high school or you currently have a Twitter. Yes, okay. So obviously it's a very, very popular tool. And so that's what we use in recruiting to get in contact with high school recruits. Because if you're looking for a recruit, I guarantee you, you can find them on Twitter somewhere. So it's a very, very powerful tool in our field. So our coaches communicate with recruits via Twitter. I communicate with recruits via Twitter. It's just a way for us to, we do get a work phone, but it's a way for us to not have to text them or find their phone number or something like that all the time. And it becomes a very powerful tool. At the same time, we also use it to get to know recruits. And so that can get a little wishy-washy, obviously, because people like to put everything and like to have freedom of speech on Twitter. And so just kind of firsthand experience, when I was in high school, I had a friend of mine who had an offer from a D1 institution to run track. So he pretty much put everything he wanted to on Twitter, which we are allowed to do. But after the college and the recruiting department kind of saw what he was putting out, he got his offer revoked. So it was like a very inappropriate video that he retweeted, and they were concerned about, I'm not quite sure what they were concerned about because they didn't really tell him. But so they actually ended up revoking his offer. And so was that the right thing to do? I don't think so, but that's really not what we use social media as a tool for. We use it as more of a tool to communicate with recruits and kind of get to know them. So if I'm having a recruit come on a visit, I'm going to scroll through his Twitter. I'm going to see what his interests are, honestly, if he tweets about his favorite food, I'm going to get his favorite food. Like, it's like a way for us to have that touch point and have that interaction with them. And on our side, it's also a way for us to pump out the great things about WVU, right? Like, our fans are very, very active on Twitter and other social media platforms. And I don't know if you guys saw, but we were ranked 11th this week for the amount of engagement that we had on Twitter with our football account. And we're not ranked in the top 25 at the moment, and we were among the 12 that were ranked, they were all top 25 opponents. And so it was kind of a big deal. Like, we're getting our name out there, right? And we, people are seeing us, and it's a way for us, because Coach Brown is very into his hashtag trust the climb, and so that's a big push for us right now. So on social media, it's trying to get our fans to trust the process and trust what we're trying to build, and it's especially important in recruiting. So just so we can have recruits on board and want to be a part of the thing that we're building over there. And so it may not be perfect right now, but it's going to be perfect later is kind of what we're pushing. And social media is a way for us to kind of do that. But kind of going back to the recruiting piece, it's just like it's just such a good touch point for us. And we also have platforms that we communicate with recruits called Whistle Recruiting. And so it actually goes and pulls, it's kind of the most bizarre thing I've ever seen in my life. So it goes and pulls every single Twitter of every high school prospects, right? So if we were going through and we needed to know Joe Brown's Twitter account and we wanted to communicate with him, it's a way for us to actually pull his Twitter. And so honestly, high school recruits need to be educated on how public their Twitter actually is, right? Because it's like we can pull it at any given point and we can DM you at any given point. And so that's kind of what I do on a daily basis. And as he said, I was at the University of Virginia and I worked in recruiting there as well. And one of my jobs all day long was to sit and go through high school recruits' Twitters of our top guys and kind of figure out, what they're doing, what they're into, what they're interested in, what music they're listening to, what they're watching. And Twitter is just such a huge, huge tool for that. It can also be used, obviously, in the negative, but freedom of speech is kind of huge for us to see what kids are tweeting about, and it gets us to get to know them and kind of learn what they're engaging with. And so it's extremely important in the world of football, and getting to know who we're bringing in, because we want to get to know the guy as much as we possibly can. Even if he comes on campus one time, you can't get to know him perfectly, right? So having social media and having that open platform, a lot of times they do have public accounts on Twitter. Sometimes they're private, but we get to know them really, really well through that. And so I think it's a very crucial tool, especially for my occupation. So that's pretty much all I have on that.
Well, we're through two of our panelists, and I think all of you can see how complex the First Amendment is. It's way more than just, I can say this because I have a right to. So, Caitlin, you can give us the legal perspective.
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of a legal perspective. So my name is Caitlin Samuelson, and I'm a third-year law student. And because I'm a law student, I'm going to start with a disclaimer. I am not yet an attorney, and more importantly, I'm not your attorney. So if I say anything that makes you think you need an attorney, please contact one or contact the ACLU of West Virginia. Don't go to jail. Yes. So now that we all have the terms and conditions out of the way, the First Amendment protects, and I'll try and enunciate and see if we can just do this. So the First Amendment protects your freedom of speech and your freedom of association from being infringed upon by the government. So that could be the federal government, and that's really what the First Amendment says. It says that Congress cannot abridge those rights that you have. And then the 14th Amendment, and a lot of old white dudes writing on courts, says that the state can't do that to you either. So neither the state government, your local commissioner, Donald Trump, none of these people, Congress, are allowed to do things that would infringe upon your First Amendment right. So what does that mean? So that means that if 10 of you want to go outside and hold signs on the sidewalk, you're allowed to do that. If you want to shout in support of Hillary or in support of Donald Trump, you can do that. You can also shout metaphorically on Facebook, on Twitter, on Tumblr, if it still exists. You have the right to engage in that political dialogue. And not only is it a right, it's critically important for us to have elections, to have dialogue, to have schools like this. We need people talking freely about issues. That's one of the things I think Shan brought up is it can be deeply empowering to be able to go on social media and talk about things that are important to you. It can also be deeply detrimental. But either way, it's very important that we keep the government from stifling our speech. There was a case called Packingham versus North Carolina that Justice Kennedy, I believe, said, a fundamental principle of the First Amendment is that all persons have access to places where they can speak and listen, and then after reflection, speak and listen once more. Traditionally, if you read anything, any boring old law textbooks about the First Amendment, you're going to talk about the New York Times. You're going to talk about broadcast media. You're going to talk about the radio. You're going to talk about George Carlin's dirty words. But media matters, and we have to keep moving forward, seeing, like, what does it mean? Can I go on Twitter and tell somebody to, I'm going to hold back that comment. And the answer, in short, is yes, you can to an extent. So you have the right to go on and say whatever you would like about political dialogue. You have the right to go on and post pictures of your cat. You have the right to go on and talk to your coworker. There's certain things that are out and out crimes that you can't go on and do. There was a case called Alanis versus United States where a man was posting Eminem lyrics threatening his ex-wife and threatening to kill her. The court said, First Amendment ain't gonna cover that. So when it comes in terms of your constitutional rights, the court's got your back most of the time. It's very, very tricky, and there's a lot of nuances, but today's court, today's law is treating social media like they would treat any other public forum. So a public forum, again, is a sidewalk outside. It's that free speech zone downtown. It's the streets. It's buses. It's anywhere you can come together. A park, for example, is a public forum. And once the government opens up a public forum, they can't say, you're not allowed in it because you're Jewish. You're not allowed in it because you support Trump. Once a public forum's open up, the government has to let that discourse happen. And that's how the internet works, even if we don't agree with the speech. I believe Dr. Beeson is going to be speaking about hate speech a little bit. And the ACLU's stance, specifically Nadine Strawson, she comes here to speak a lot. She was the first female president of the ACLU. She's brilliant. And a lot of the time, the Supreme Court, as well as people within the ACLU, say that we have a marketplace of ideas, again, the discourse that Shan brought up. And the way we cure hate speech, the way we cure bad speech, is to bring up good speech, is to keep talking and educating each other. And I think, personally, I think that's the beautiful thing about social media. And I think that's the beautiful thing about how we can use this public forum to keep the political dialogue going on. And I don't know, keep the government off of our speech. So that's my stance. If you have questions, we'll have a Q&A, but you can always come up afterwards too. Thanks.
Thank you, Caitlin. Joel, bring us home.
Bring us back. So I'm Joel Beeson, professor in the College of Media, and I wanted to start off kind of echoing my co-panelists here about the importance of the First Amendment. And as Dr. Urbanski said, it's really complicated. It's become more complicated because of social media. But I wanted to start off reading something from U.S. Attorney Justin Herdman's comments in August 2019 on recent Ohio cases involving political violence. And I think it's important for us to understand, as Dr. Urbanski said, that the First Amendment there's a purpose for it in our democracy. It's not just about saying whatever you feel or whatever you think. The reason why hate speech is protected under the First Amendment is because of this marketplace of ideas. And I want to read this statement he made because I think it spells out pretty eloquently that position. And this was at a hearing about white supremacy, some cases of terrorism in Ohio. And he says, "Now let me speak generally to those who are advocates of white supremacy or white nationalism. I am talking directly to you. The Constitution protects your right to speak, your right to think, and your right to believe. If you want to waste the blessings of liberty by going down a path of hatred and failed ideologies, that's your choice. Democracy allows you to test those ideas in a public forum. If you want to submit your beliefs to the American people and get their reaction, please be my guest. Keep this in mind, though. Thousands and thousands of young Americans already voted with their lives to ensure that this same message of intolerance, death, and destruction would not prevail. You can count their ballots by visiting any American cemetery in North Africa, Italy, France, or Belgium, and tallying the white headstones. You can also recite the many names of civil rights activists who bled and died in opposing supporters of those same ideologies of hatred. Their voices may be distant, but they can still be heard. Go ahead and make your case for Nazism, a white nation, and racial superiority. The Constitution may give you a voice, but it doesn't guarantee you a receptive audience. Your right to free speech does not automatically mean that people will agree with you. In fact, you have an absolute God-given and inalienable right to be on the losing end of this argument. What you don't have, though, is the right to take out your frustration at failure in the political arena by resorting to violence. You don't have any right to threaten the lives and well-being of our neighbors. They, under the Constitution, have an absolute God-given and inalienable right to live peacefully, to worship as they please, to be free from fear that they might become a target simply because of the color of their skin, the country of their birth, or the form of their prayer. And that statement, I think, sums up the basis for First Amendment protection of hate speech. The next thing I want to say, and let me know when my time's up, we talk about protecting that because you have to have these opposing ideas in the marketplace of ideas so we can all, in a democracy, determine what are the facts, what are the things we believe in, what are the arguments for and against these ideas. And the problem with social media is that the algorithms used to drive your feed are giving you more and more of what you believe in. There's a thing that Eli Pariser wrote called the filter bubble, and it was about these algorithms that are basically learn all this data like you were talking about with Twitter, your habits, your behaviors, your likes, your dislikes, what you buy, where you go, all of those things go into this determination by the computer of what you are susceptible to and what you might be moved by, or just based on your previous behavior. So what happens is if you start liking one thing, it wants to give you more of that. And this is tied to the economic model of social media, where they sell advertising, including political advertising or any kind of messaging to you based upon that algorithm. Facebook had a white supremacy thing where you could amplify your message to people who might be susceptible to that message based on their previous behavior. So part of this is for me to say there's a real issue here with the First Amendment and social media, because if the First Amendment relies on a marketplace of ideas and your marketplace only has certain things, you're going to start believing in that. And so we've become a polarized nation where that ideal, democratic ideal of the marketplace of ideas is in danger. And there are people from foreign governments, there are people who have an ideological belief that are spreading chaos and misinformation and trolling people and all kinds of things like that. And it's a very serious threat to democracy. So that's about it for me.
Thanks. Well, we have four very different points of view on the First Amendment. And we do live in a time when I think people don't necessarily want to hang around people who think the same. They want people to think the same way. They don't want to hang around with somebody who has different viewpoints. And social media, as Dr. Beeson said, really has amplified that. You can follow all the people that are just like you. So with that in mind, how about a few questions from our esteemed audience? Do we have someone with a microphone? Yeah. We have a mic here for you. Yeah.
Sure.
Do you think it would be legal to have somewhat of an internet gatekeeper? Because it seems what Professor Beeson was saying, that a lot of misinformation is going around and it's spreading a lot of issues. So I was wondering, if there have been talks about it. I don't know if you know, but and then if not, like maybe what your professional opinion is on having like a gatekeeper of some kind.
So I guess the problem with a gatekeeper, and there have been a couple different cases that have gone at the gatekeeper idea in different ways. So there's a case called Bucky v. Vallejo that talks about campaign finance, and that kind of touches on what Dr. Beeson was saying. Is a lot of this marketing that's happening on social media is campaign and electioneering, and there's a lot of limitations and a lot of caution to be had in, we are going to limit everyone's speech for the good of everyone. And in doing that in a viewpoint neutral way. So the concern with having an internet gatekeeper, or the argument against it, would be a concern about putting the government, which is put in by political process, even the independent agencies, like even something like the EPA. You're doing environmental work, but obviously you're put into that position in a political way. Even if you try and set up an independent gatekeeper, which is an excellent idea, there's a lot of concern about, well, how is the gatekeeper going to make their determinations? Who's going to choose what speech is proper? Who's going to choose the quantity of the speech? Who's going to choose the funding of the speech? There's a couple different cases. So like I said, Bucky v. Vallejo did that with campaign finance. There's been a recent, and this is sort of related, there's been a recent law that went through called FOSTA-SESTA. It's the Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act and the Stop Online Sex Trafficking Act, or something along those lines, where they're trying to stop sex trafficking online, which, I mean, is laudable. I think no one in this room wants that to happen. However, again, we get concerned when the government is in the place of choosing, oh, well, this is sex trafficking clearly, so we're going to eliminate that, but we're also going to eliminate this entire dating website because that could possibly be sex trafficking. And so the too long didn't read of my answer is, yes, people are thinking about that, but there's a lot of concerns in how you make your internet gatekeeper a proper, not tyrannical censor. I don't know if Dr. Beeson has anything to add.
I think we talk about this issue of gatekeeper, right? And speak of these platforms, right, as somehow public forums, when in fact they already have gatekeepers. Their algorithms are curating the information you get, based on selling your personal data to advertisers, and then also they have terms of service. You don't, in fact, have First Amendment rights on private property. Again, there's this gray area of being a public forum, but you don't have free speech rights under the First Amendment on somebody else's platform, right? They can say, we're going to kick you out of here. Like if you came in my house and started saying stuff, I can throw you out and you can't stand on the First Amendment. So there's an issue here with the privatization of this internet space. I think that we really, need to have a discussion about, Mark Zuckerberg in his manifesto talked about setting up an advisory board that Facebook was going to nominate, that was going to vet content. And then you have Twitter saying they're not going to accept political advertising because of the problems with that. So it's a really complicated issue, but the laws we have in place and the idea of a marketplace of ideas is something we need to look at in the through this filter of it's already being vetted and curated. There's already gatekeepers, but who don't have an incentive in some ways because they're making a huge amount of money off of this. And the other thing I want to add is they were given immunity from libel laws, copyright laws, all those sort of laws that keep most journalism organizations or publishers within bounds in terms of false information and all that. In 1996, the Communications Decency Act, part of that was struck down, and the reason these platforms were given immunity from that is so there would be economic development on the web. But now they're monopolies, they're huge, and billions of people, and that's where we get all our information. So, you know, the landscape has changed, and as we've seen, it's really threatening a lot of who we are as a democracy.
Plus, there's the whole dimension is if you have a gatekeeper, and it's a gatekeeper that you want to be a human being, how do you hire that person? Do you elect them? Imagine the job description, want a gatekeeper for entire internet. You know, it would be impossible to find someone who wouldn't be attacked by virtually everyone, because elections don't always guarantee the right person for the job. So that's another great, wondrous thing about free speech. How free is free, and when you restrict it, how much do you restrict it? It's a constant tension. Another question?
Oh, thank you. Kind of continuing on the subject of gatekeeping in social media, do you think there are ways of ethically, like, that would make the process for picking, like, gatekeepers a more ethical process in terms of making sure that they're unbiased or that all voices are being heard?
So again, if we were going to do, like Dr. Beeson mentioned, these companies try and set their own advisory board, but again, they're incentivized to take money from campaigns, so really it's kind of a farce. In terms of if we were going to do gatekeeping, if we were going to have a federal gatekeeper, I guess, again, there are agencies that are independent agencies. So obviously we elect people into office on all sorts of different levels, but then there are independent agencies which are appointed. So, for example, labor law and employment law, those are appointed positions. And it's a board that requires people from multiple parties. So you have Republicans and Democrats on those independent agency boards. And they come together and make rules about how the world is going to run. You could try and do something like that. But ethically, again, we're getting into a really tricky area again of how do you determine what's too far and what I think is proper for the marketplace of ideas and what you think is proper for political discussion might be two different things. And do we really want to be censoring any speech at all?
I think probably, thinking more in terms of how to disincentivize making money off of hate speech, making money off of, trolling and, death threats and all of that for the platforms is one way to think about it. Rather than, I don't know. I mean, I don't know who would be a gatekeeper. They have people now who at Facebook who are reviewing, stuff to see if it violates their terms of service. And they're sitting there all day looking at racist, misogynistic, violent, gore, sexual, extreme stuff all day. And, these people are suffering from that. It is a stream of really objectionable material that you don't see on broadcast TV, right? So the FCC regulates broadcast TV in the public interest. So you can't have even indecent kinds of things, nudity or swear words during a certain time, that kids would be up watching it. Which is ludicrous because they can be in their bedroom with the Chromebooks issued by their schools, watching who knows what on it. So, we have to think about, what is in the interest of democracy, and how can we incentivize these or disincentivize the platforms, or make them responsible for the content in some way, like a publisher. They claim they're not a publisher. They're just a platform, like a dumb pipe, right? We just provide this microphone for us to speak, but they're making billions of dollars worth of advertising off of that, and curating and editing your feed so that you will stay there longer. So what kind of ways can we think about to make them more responsible? Because they don't have an incentive. They're making, it doesn't matter what the content is.
Yeah.
Along
This is
those
kind of a
lines.
side comment, sorry.
Go ahead.
The NCAA is kind of trying to make themselves the gatekeeper as much as they really want to. I mean, in terms of like keeping, like you were talking about, trying to keep everyone on an equal playing field, that's why the NCAA was made, right? Like they're trying to keep every single student athlete on the same playing field. There was a case like not too long ago about, I forget what sport he was involved in, but I'm sure it was football because it always is. And he was at UCF, and he was actually messaging with an agent talking about, possibilities for him in the future, but the NCAA was like, oh, violation, like gonna flag you, gonna stamp you for it. And it's like, he fought back and said it was a freedom of speech issue, saying that why isn't he allowed to just kind of see what his future options are? But again, the NCAA likes to deem themselves the gatekeeper, and that's as nice as I can put it.
I'm going to go for the dumb question of the afternoon award. Why, and anybody can jump in and answer this, why in the era of social media, and granted, there's a lot of heartfelt, important, touching comments that are tweeted, posted, whatever the venue may be, but it seems invariably that a lot of the large segment of the population will just gravitate into really nasty, stupid comments. Why do people do that?
So my boyfriend and I were actually having this conversation, and it's a lack of accountability. A lot of the things that you say online, you would never say to someone's face. Once you take away that person-to-person dialogue, it creates something, I don't want to say evil, but it kind of gives you an advantage, right? Because if you say something mean or nasty online, or you get into like a Facebook fight with like a soccer mom or something, that's just kind of seen as casual discourse. These are things that you would never say to someone in real life, but when you give them the media of, the medium of the internet, then it makes things so much easier. It makes it easier to be a better person, and it also makes it easier to be a bad person as well.
Anonymity, whether it's a real anonymity or a false anonymity, that people won't know, like associate your comments online with you. Recently here in town, there was supposed to be an event at the library that ended up being canceled due to horrendous, violent threats that were all online. Or in majority online, but some of them were coming from Wyoming, from Missouri, from Montana. Whether or not those people were actually in Wyoming, Missouri, or Montana, we don't know, but people are either able to change their location and change their identity online, or think that to them, which is just a detachment that creates so many problems.
Yeah, and I think also the kind of getting back to the systemic issue, that what these algorithms, what the economic model and the algorithm is doing is keeping you engaged, right? So they can sell your eyeballs and your pocketbook to whoever wants to get a message to you. So all of these devices and also the interfaces are meant to keep you there. And there was a study done recently about how to increase engagement in social media. Well, the way they saw a 70% increase in engagement if you put in certain words that are about outrage, anger, just stuff that you get really, upset about, right? So if you think about it, if you're in this media sphere where there's just all of this information that's spewing out like a tailpipe, and to grab your attention, the things that are going to grab your attention are things that are going to resonate with you, that the algorithm has done its social psychology and figured out, you get outraged at this. Well, it's going to, give you more of that. So, it's kind of a race to the bottom. It's the titillating things, it's the sensational things, it's the things that push your buttons that the algorithm is trained to feed you, to curate for you. Because its job is to keep you engaged, right? And that's where these companies make money. So you have that driving this as well. And what happens is people start changing, right? It changes your kind of attitudes, and we all become these angry, outraged, self-righteous people that are really polarized. So again, I think there's a lot of systemic reasons for that, in addition to just, it's sort of like appealing to our worst impulses, right? I have a colleague in New York who studies this, who says, this is basically a race to the bottom. You have addictive technology, you have, this incredible amount of information that feeds you stuff that is basically appealing to your sort of lower, impulses. And, I think there's some truth to that.
And with venues like Twitter, you can, of course, always delete the tweet, and it's still there for everyone to see. And that was obvious in the sports world with Antonio Brown a couple months ago. 1 minute he's literally flying around his backyard, and then the next minute, 2 or 3 days later, he's cut by the Patriots, and he starts tweeting things about Robert Kraft, who's the owner of the team and who's a billionaire. But he deleted those tweets, but everybody could still see them, and they had been retweeted hundreds of thousands of times. So I think a lot of it is just anger, but still, I just wish people could put the brakes on and reason a little bit, even just a little bit.
Maybe apologize, so that makes everything okay, right? He apologized today on Twitter, months later. It makes everything okay. I will say one thing that social media does do in the world of college athletics is, so there's an arms race within college athletics, right? Like everybody's got to have the best facility, everybody's got to pay their coach the most, everybody's got to have the best jerseys, the best whatever, right? So like everybody's constantly spending more money, and there's an arms race within that. And I think social media has definitely an arm in that, because if you look in the world of recruiting specifically, if you look and see what recruits are doing, they have to make a signing day video. So when I was in high school, people would do like the pick the hat off the table, right? Like that was good enough. You had 3 hats on the table, and you would pick up the WVU hat, put it on, and be like, woo, I'm going there. That's not the case anymore. They get full production team to follow them around, and they do a full production video for their signing day video, or their commitment video is actually what they're called. So social media is 100% driving that. It's like, who has the best video that you could possibly see? And I mean, the guys are very welcome to do that, but they're about 10 minutes long, and I'm always like, okay, let me scroll to the end to see where you're actually going. And so that, I think social media is definitely driving college athletics in to see who's getting the bigger and better facilities, who's doing the best commitment video. And I think, I mean, social media has such a big arm in that, because again, like, the guy can, rather than going on their local news channel and picking a hat off a table, he can go on Twitter and hide behind his phone and have this 10-minute long video that you're gonna watch because you wanna know where he's going. So.
Have you encountered any recruits at WVU who just call one of the coaches and say, after thinking and talking to my mom and dad, I've decided to come to WVU? Does anyone do that anymore?
Yes.
Oh, really? Good.
But they're gonna put a very long thing on Twitter also. It's gonna be a twofer. It's gonna be a, hey, Coach Brown, I'm coming here. Hey, I also am gonna put it on social media.
So they all use social media.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah. And it's also like, they put us on pins and needles all the time. So if a recruit texts or can tweet, I have a lot on my mind today, the whole staff freaks out. Like, what are you thinking about? Are you gonna come to WVU? Are you gonna take your commitment back? It's like, it's just kind of crazy how much it drives like the world of college athletics.
Other questions? We have one in the back.
Yeah, so my question is for all you guys. So for us as college students, what's like one piece of advice you guys could give us for when we choose to express our First Amendment right in 2018, or 2019, excuse me?
Be careful. People are looking.
Yeah, I think the thing about social media is that, you know, like when you're tweeting and everything, I feel like the way, like how addictive it is, you're not really thinking about how many people can see that. So just be mindful, you know, consider, you know, who can see it, who's reading it, what audience you were trying to reach with that tweet. And, you know, just, I mean, I don't, like, try to be respectful, you know? I mean, I just think that being mindful and trying to be respectful are two of the biggest things, especially on social media.
I would agree with both of those. Be mindful, be careful, but don't let that chill you. I think, I want to thank all of you guys for showing up, because I think it's a duty to show up and be informed and be smart and share that with other people. And be careful, don't do anything stupid, but at the same time, form an opinion and share that with others. Share it with your friends. Share it on polling day. Like, just, yeah, don't let it stop you. Don't be afraid to speak.
I definitely think in terms of finding jobs, just kind of be aware of what you are putting out there and be respectful, because employers do look at what you're putting out there. Went through the job search not too long ago, actually like 7 months ago. So just be aware they are going to look. And I remember it was after a bad football game. I tweeted, I hate football, because I was very sad about my team losing. And so they asked me to delete it, because it was just like, you're about to work in football, you need to get rid of that. So it's like, they are looking. That was probably a year prior to me being hired. So it's stuff like that. Just be mindful and be aware as you're going into the working world as well.
So I think you have to be aware that there is no privacy anymore. And I think that's one of the biggest issues for us, is that these notions of privacy are, you know, gone. You have to think about, you know, as, you know, my co-panelists have said, being aware of and being careful about what you say on social media. My advice for you all in terms of expressing yourself is express yourself in other ways besides talking on social media, besides tweeting. Use it as a tool. But I think there are other ways to express that by your actions and what you do. And going out of your way on one hand to look for all kinds of different sources for your information that are credible, checking your sources, being educated, and especially being aware of sharing or passing on or amplifying information that might not be correct. Because then you're just part of spreading disinformation. So I think we really have a deep responsibility in that respect right now, until we can figure out a way to make these big tech platforms more accountable for that.
I think we're about out of time. We have about 4 minutes left. If somebody has a quick question, we can take one. One more? Casey?
Do you think that incorporating media literacy in education should be a priority for like younger students especially?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, when people, we've had people like come to our high school and they're like, hey, just watch what you're doing, but they never like told you about the real life consequences that you could have because of it. I mean, there was no discussion about like the First Amendment in regards to this. So yes, absolutely. I think that it should be taught like in high school classes and not just like a day where kids go to the auditorium and talk about it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I do think that's really important. I think we all need to be responsible. And yeah, I have to use this analogy that I've heard. You know, you hear this, well, you know, parents need to be responsible for their kids and teach them how to use social media. But when you have, you know, a working mom, whatever, their kids, up against a corporation worth $100 billion that has hired the best neuroscientists and the best social psychologists and game designers and, you know, coders, that's not a fair fight. So I think it's important for us to, you know, to have media literacy education, and we all have to be responsible. But again, like I said, I don't think it's a fair fight.
It's definitely something that needs to start early because, I mean, I was a media studies major undergrad, and so that's really when I learned how crucial it was. Like, and that's a little late because now, like, kids have social media in middle school, and so it's a little terrifying that they're not being taught that almost immediately. And so it's definitely something that needs to start early and be reiterated. And like she said, that it needs to be taught the consequences much later in life as well.
I think we're out of time. I just wanted to thank our panelists. Maybe we can give them a round of applause. Plus, I wanted to remind everyone that from 6 to 8 at Terra Cafe, there's going to be a great First Amendment trivia contest. There's unbelievable prizes, and it's a chance for you to be a fame and an internet sensation. So you can bone up for an hour and then come down. Yeah, $100 gift card. Yeah, not $100,000 gift card. $100 gift card. Question?
I just had one more question. I think we all witnessed an interaction of hate speech somehow, in some way. So I think my question is, ethically speaking, how do we combat this hate speech? Do we do it, you know, by pretending that it's not there, ignoring it, or do we embrace it with love? How do we do it?
I think it all starts in education. I mean, literally in elementary school, and I think it goes back to the question about social media literacy. It's just starting early. The internet is kind of just completely unprecedented, and I feel like everyone in this room was kind of thrown into it. Like, we all grew up with the internet, but not social media. So we were kind of like in the midst of, you know, the internet and social media starting. So yeah, I mean, I think the answer is education and starting early and, you know, having panel discussions like this to kind of move forward towards the answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely just a very, very touchy topic to talk about because we all come from somewhere different, right? We all grew up with somewhere different, and it's definitely education. I definitely 100% agree with that because you can grow up one place and learn one thing, and your textbooks say one thing, and you go to college and you're like, that's not right. That's not what actually history says, or just issues involving that. It's just the more education, the more we can spread education to those who may not have that additional textbook or additional book that they know to find this information and to read. And I definitely am a spread love person. I love that. Just rather than attacking, it's educating and spreading truth rather than attacking via social media. That's always just a hard thing to witness when people are going back and forth like that, rather than just laying out the facts and letting them soak in it as they wish.
The best and the worst thing about the First Amendment is it applies to us all equally. It covers people's right to say stupid, hateful things, and it covers my right to call them out for it. And there's an awesome book by Nadine Strawson called Hate, all about hate speech and how we can counter it and combat it. And I really think, I think you mentioned responding to hate with love, and I think that can be a really great way to combat it, is the education and the love. And I think Dr. Beeson's speech or quote regarding you have the God-given right to do that, but I also have the God-given right to be peaceable and to live my life to the best I can. So I think just spread all the love you can and try and counter all the hate speech you see, call people out for them, put them on blast, and just try and put good into the world. Part of that's on us.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And, you know, I think that one of the things about hate speech is people have a right to say really stupid things, and as it said, waste their lives on hatred and, you know, debunked pseudoscience and racial theories from the past. But they don't have a right to threaten people, and they don't have a right to weaponize social media and use that to create chaos and use it to sort of terrorize people. So I don't know if it was today or yesterday, somebody airdropped the manifesto of the Christchurch shooter on a bunch of students' phones at Syracuse University, and people flipped out. The Christchurch shooter who went in and killed, you know, multiple women, children, and babies in a mosque and live streamed it. And that was airdropped, and people freaked out, and the FBI was there, and students didn't want to go to class. That's terrorism, right? That's terrorizing people. And under our Constitution, everyone has a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, no matter who they are. And we have to keep that in mind. And if we treat each other that way, things like that kind of terrorism, that's a criminal act. That's not an act of free speech.
Thank you all. It's a good place to end. Hopefully I'll see you all at Terror Cafe in about an hour.
Excuse me.